And there are many elements how one can see whether it's fair trial or not, how the court treats defendants on both sides, whether there is equality of arms, does defense have the same space, time, access to witnesses and documents like prosecution, but there are many other elements of a fairness of the trial. So this is something we really hope to see once prosecution goes on. And second thing that we want to see is the factual evidence. What has prosecution been using to prove and state of mind and criminal acts on the ground, and in effort to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Obviously, the only people on the court that can eventually judge that is at the end of the trial and in the judgment are judges. But these are the things that we really hope to see at the end of prosecution case, that the modern standards of fairness of the trial and treatment of defendants in a courtroom are upheld with the highest of standards. Well, you know, once prosecution arrests its case, defense lawyers have a lot of work to do. And this is something that is called half-time judgment. There is a rule in criminal case that when prosecution case is over, the defense lawyers go through the evidence and file a motion asking for dismissal of some of the charges for which they claim that prosecution actually did not lead the evidence. So this point of time is quite important, and I hope that Kosovo public via media will be tuned into it, because there is quite objective possibility that judges will strike from the indictment based on the fact that there was no evidence fled, even some evidence was maybe weak on certain crimes, that then defense case will be smaller when it comes to the leading evidence for the charges in indictment that are left. So this is very, very important moment. First of all, no one could have expected that prosecution case will take 4 years. Because if there will be equality of arms, the 4 defendants will take another 4 years. 8 years for first instance judgment is quite a long time. So hopefully defense part of the case will not be so long. So that first thing, no, I don't think I expected it to be so long. Secondly, I already had some indications that court of public opinion, what the public outside of courts thinks and perceives these courts, would be more active. I'm very surprised that, for example, in the Netherlands, where a court is placed, there is almost no interest among journalists to discuss any of the underlying issues. If you move a little bit more to, say, Western Europe, the same, even in the neighborhood of Kosovo. Press is not very keen to follow the trial on, say, week-by-week basis. And that is indicator of so many things that 4, 5, 6 years ago we couldn't really predict. One of the reasons is that Kosovo, as the Western Balkans, has not been as important to the world politics as it used to be in the 90s and 2000 and even 2010 onwards. And that that by itself is one of the negative developments that I could see. It would be much better if the world citizens and world community would be interested, comment, write op-eds about it, but no, how I see it, it is very small public opinion niche. It's a totally different story. It's quite amazing because you have a former president who was sitting president of Kosovo when he was indicted. This is a big, big move to do if you are a sitting president, if you are still in office, as Hashim Thaçi was when indictment came. This was just around the election time, as you remember, in 2019. Then he was indicted in 2020, but that was the time that, you know, he was sitting president and they were interviewing him and people around him. So it was a big time to touch and to investigate sitting president. Once he was out of the office, he was indicted and he voluntarily was transferred in The Hague. And despite of that we do not have media attention as we should have to understand what is happening, how is it possible, and what is this relationship between accountability of people at the highest political levels and impunity. Because at this point we have sitting presidents that engage in large mass atrocities and still head of states. They're indicted and they are out of the reach of international justice system. And then in Kosovo court you see, oh, just a few years ago, 5 years ago, it did happen, and now it can't happen anymore. The Kosovo Specialist Chambers on paper has adopted high standards of any court dealing with criminal charges. So on paper they even have an ombudsman for human rights. So you have an internal institute that addresses all sorts of complaints from all sides involved, but we expect that defendants on that side would probably come up with more issues. So on paper it's all fine, but in reality, there for interested observer, the first thing obviously goes back to justice delayed, justice denied, which says if a court takes too long time to render a judgment and a verdict, and especially if a verdict was to be acquittal, then these trials last for too long, and someone has to explain why is it needed to have, for relatively short period of time, very confined territory, to have such a long prosecution part of the case. And I'm very interested to see how time it will eventually take for Thaçi et al. Trial to end, to be concluded with the judgment, first instance judgments, appeal judgment, and what is eventually going to be judgment and verdict. And I think that would be a very good moment then to look back and analyze this issue of what were the rights of defendants and how they were upheld by and prosecution and judges. But this will be simply post facto wisdom, because for people who would stand in trial and spend, say, 9 years in detention while trial is going on, if they are once acquitted, it is going to be very, very difficult thing to deal with. And what are the human rights remedies for this? I don't know. I think, first of all, these ongoing trials, Thaçi et al., need to come to conclusion as soon as possible. This is no doubt in my mind that expediency will depend on the time frame when we will have these both judgments. Secondly, how I see it from the perspective of Kosovo Specialist Chambers, I don't see them issuing more indictments. Because if they would now issue more indictments, then the court will probably need to exist at least 10 more years. So it would be quite extravagant existence for a relatively small and regional international justice, international criminal court at all. So on one hand, for individual trials, I hope that they will finish as soon as possible. My big question would be to people who worked on the court, if this would be the moment the demands would come to create Kosovo specialist chambers, would the same politician of Kosovo say, okay, we are going to work along, we are going to amend the constitution, or would they say, no, this is the wrong address you are knocking at. We are not the part of the problem in post-South Balkan area. You had a wrong door for normalization and for stabilization of Southeast. Certainly when Kosovo is concerned, you should knock first many times in Belgrade, and then you come to us. And this is very worthy of public discussion in your state.